The morning mist rolled across the floating mountains like a blanket of silver dreams. Somewhere in that endless sea of clouds and ancient stone, a young Navi woman named Teani stood at the edge of a cliff. Her golden eyes watched the sky with fierce determination. Today was the day she would either become a true warrior of her clan or die trying. Teani was not like the other young hunters of the Amayakaya people. She was smaller than most, and her left leg carried a scar from a childhood accident that made her walk with a slight limp. Many in her village believed she would never complete the ritual of Ignamaya. They whispered behind her back that she should accept her fate and become a weaver or healer instead. But Teani refused to listen to their doubts. Fire burned in her heart, and nothing could put it out. Her mother had been the greatest Ikran rider the clan had ever known. Stories of her mother soaring through thunderstorms and leading hunting parties across impossible distances still echoed through the village. But her mother had fallen from the sky during a great battle against sky predators when Teani was only 7 summers old. Since that terrible day, Teani had made a promise to herself. She would fly. She would honor her mother's memory by conquering the skies. The climb up the Hallelujah Mountains had taken 3 days. Teani's muscles burned with exhaustion, and her fingers were raw from gripping the wet stone. Several times she had nearly fallen, but each time she caught herself and continued upward. Now she stood at the nesting grounds of the wild banshees. The great flying creatures circled overhead, their colorful wings catching the early light. Their screams filled the air like music made of thunder. Teani moved forward carefully. The rocks beneath her feet were slick with morning dew. One wrong step could send her tumbling down into the endless clouds below. She had watched older hunters make this journey before. She knew she must find a banshee that would choose her just as much as she would choose it. The bond between rider and Ikran was sacred. It could not be forced. Both must fight, and both must surrender. Most of the banshees ignored her presence. They were used to young Navi climbing to their nesting grounds. They knew the ritual and wanted no part of it. These creatures were content with their wild freedom. But Teani was not looking for a content creature. She was looking for a spirit as wild and hungry as her own. Then she saw him. At the far edge of the nesting ground, separated from all the others, sat a massive banshee unlike any Teani had ever seen. His scales were deep black with streaks of burning orange running along his wings like rivers of fire. His eyes were not the usual yellow or green, but a strange and unsettling red. He was larger than the others by half, and scars covered his body like a map of countless battles. The other banshees kept their distance from him. Even the great Leonopteryx would think twice before challenging such a beast. The hunters of her clan had spoken of this creature in hushed voices. They called him Tarak Yan, the shadow of death. Many young warriors had tried to bond with him over the years. All had failed. 3 had died in the attempt. The elders had forbidden anyone from approaching him, declaring him cursed and unbondable. But Teani felt something strange as she looked at the great beast. She felt a connection, like a rope made of starlight stretching between their souls. This creature was alone, just as she had been alone her entire life. This creature was feared and avoided, just as she had been feared and avoided because of her differences. This creature had known pain and loss, just as she had known pain and loss. She walked toward him. The shadow of death turned his massive head and fixed his red eyes upon her. A deep growl rumbled from his throat, shaking the very stones beneath Teani's feet. His wings spread wide, blocking out the sun and casting her in shadow. He was warning her. He was telling her to leave or face destruction. Teani did not leave. She took another step forward, and the great banshee lunged. His jaws snapped shut inches from her face, close enough that she could smell his breath and feel the heat of his body. Most hunters would have jumped back or raised their weapons. But Teani stood perfectly still. She looked into those red eyes and saw not a monster, but a wounded soul. The banshee struck again, and this time his claws raked across her shoulder, drawing blood. Pain exploded through Tayane's body, but she refused to cry out. She refused to show weakness. Instead, she reached up and placed her hand against the creature's snout. The great beast froze. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Tayane could feel the creature's heartbeat through his scales, fast and furious like a war drum. She could feel his confusion and his fear. Yes, fear. This mighty beast who had defeated all challenges was afraid. He was afraid of being bonded, afraid of losing his freedom, afraid of caring for another living being only to lose them as he had lost others before. Tayane understood. She understood completely. She began to speak to him in the old tongue, the language of the first people, the words her mother had taught her as a child. She told him about her mother and how she had fallen from the sky. She told him about her leg and how the other children had mocked her. She told him about her loneliness and her dreams of flying. She told him everything, holding nothing back, making herself completely vulnerable before this creature who could kill her with a single bite. The Banshee listened. Slowly and possibly, the tension left his great body. His wings folded against his sides. His red eyes saw from fret to curiosity to something that looked almost like recognition. He lowered his head until his snout touched Tayane's chest, right above her heart. Tayane reached for her cue, the long braid of neural fibers that hung down her back. This was the moment of truth. This was the moment when the bond would form or fail. With trembling hands, she connected her cue to the Banshee's antenna. The world exploded into light and color and sensation. Tayane gasped as she felt the Banshee's memories pour into her mind. She saw his hatching on a stormy night. She saw his first flight through lightning and rain. She saw the mate he had loved and lost to a great Leonopteryx. She saw the eggs that had been destroyed, the children he would never know. She felt his rage and his grief and his terrible loneliness. And in return, the Banshee felt everything she had felt. He saw her mother's last flight. He felt the pain of her injured leg. He experienced every cruel word, every doubtful glance, every moment she had been made to feel less than worthy. Two wounded souls touched across the bridge of their bond, and in that touch, they found healing. When Tayane opened her eyes, tears were streaming down her face. The great Banshee, the shadow of death, was making a sound she had never heard from any Ikran before. It was almost like a purr, a sound of contentment and acceptance and belonging. She climbed onto his back. The moment her legs gripped his sides, she knew this was where she was meant to be. The Banshee's muscles tensed beneath her, and then they were launching into the sky with a force that stole the breath from her lungs. The wind roared past her ears. The clouds rushed up to meet them. And for the first time in her life, Tayane felt truly free. They flew. They flew through the floating mountains, weaving between ancient stones that had hung in the sky since the world was young. They flew through waterfalls of mist and curtains of rain. They flew so high that the stars seemed close enough to touch, and so low that the treetops brushed against their bellies. They flew until the sun set and rose again, until Tayane lost all sense of time and direction and self. She was not just Tayane anymore. She was something new, something greater, a being of earth and sky, of flesh and wind, of pain and joy and boundless possibility. When they finally returned to the village, the entire clan gathered to witness their arrival. Gasps and cries of shock filled the air as the people recognized the legendary Banshee upon which Tayane rode. The elders could not believe their eyes. The young hunters who had mocked her fell silent with shame. Even the great chief of the Omaticaya came forward to see this miracle for himself. Tayane landed in the center of the village with grace and power. She dismounted from her Banshee and stood tall before her people. The scar on her leg still ached. The wound on her shoulder still bled, but none of that mattered. She had done what no one believed she could do. She had tamed the untamable. She had bonded with the shadow of death. The chief approached her with wonder in his eyes. He asked her how she had accomplished such an impossible feat. Tayani looked at her Banshee, at the great beast who had become her partner and her friend, and she smiled. She explained that she had not tamed him through strength or skill. She had not conquered him through force or will. She had simply shown him her true self, her wounds and her weaknesses, her fears and her hopes. She had offered him not domination but understanding, not control but connection. And in return, he had offered her the same. The bond between Ryder and Ikran was not about power, Tayani declared. It was about trust. It was about two souls recognizing each other across the distance of their differences and choosing to walk together rather than alone. The chief nodded slowly, and there was new respect in his gaze. He declared that from that day forward, Tayani would be known as Tayani Teskaha Tarukitan, Tayani of the Shadow. She would lead the clan's aerial hunters and teach the young ones the true meaning of the bond. As the celebration began and the drums of her people filled the night with rhythm, Tayani walked to the edge of the village with her Banshee beside her. Together they looked up at the stars, at the endless sky that was now their home. The creature she had bonded with pressed his great head against her shoulder, careful to avoid her wound. She reached up and stroked his scales, feeling the warmth of his body and the steady beat of his heart. They had both been broken. They had both been alone, but together they were whole. Together they were strong. Together they would rule the skies and show the world that the greatest power was not found in the muscles of the body, but in the courage of the heart. The moons rose above the forest, casting silver light across the land. Somewhere in the distance, a pack of viper wolves howled at the night. The great forest hummed with life and danger and beauty. And above it all, a young Navi maiden and her wild Banshee prepared for a lifetime of adventures. Their story was just beginning, and the skies awaited their return.